Okay, we're at the very end of Kuf Aleph Amid Beis. Today's topic is Aver Min Hachai, which is the Isser Deraisa of eating a limb while the animal is still alive. So says the Gemara, Tan Rabbanon, Aver Min Hachai, the Isser of eating Aver Min Hachai is Noig Bebehema, Chai of Oif. It applies to any living animal, whether they're Behema, Chai, and Oif, Bein Tamei and Bein Tahirim, whether they're kosher or non-kosher. Meaning, if a Jew grabs a chazer and rips off the arm while the animal's still alive, you'll be over Isser Aver Min Hachai in addition to eating chazer. Divir Rav Yehuda Rav Eliezer. This is the Shita of Yehuda Rav Eliezer, which is a chiddush that Aver Min Hachai applies to non-kosher animals as well. That's Rav Yehuda and Rav Eliezer. The Chum disagree. The Chum say no. Eina noig el b'tahirin. Aver Min Hachai only applies to kosher animals, as the Gemara is going to explain. Their drasha is dafka, a kosher animal that can be eaten when it's shechted. Is it usher to eat when it's alive? But a chazer, which is usher to eat even when it's shechted, is not usher to eat when it's alive. Now, what does it mean? It's not usher to eat. It means you're not going to be over Aver Min Hachai. It's chazer still, obviously. But the point is, the isser of Aver Min Hachai, according to the Chum, does not apply to non-kosher animals. Rav Yechanan explains Shnei Mikra Echad Darshu. This machlokes between Rav Yehuda, Rav Eliezer, and the Chachamim is based on the following pasuk. The pasuk says regarding Aver Min Hachai, Rak Chazak lebilti echel adam ki adam hu nefesh. Don't eat the blood because the blood is the soul. Then it says, V'lo yisoichal hanefesh im habasar, and don't take a flesh of the animal while it's alive. In other words, Aver Min Hachai. So in the same pasuk, there's an isser of dam and Aver Min Hachai. So it says Rav Yehuda and Rav Eliezer very simply. Any animal that you're not allowed to drink the blood, you're not allowed to eat Aver Min Hachai. Are you allowed to drink pork blood? Of course not. So any time you're not allowed to drink the blood, you're not allowed to eat Aver Min Hachai. Treif animals also you're not allowed to eat. Non-kosher animals also you're not allowed to eat the blood. Says the Gemara, Kol sha'ata mitzuv al dama yata mitzvah ivarav. Their source that the Isser Aver Min Hachai applies to non-kosher animals is because the juxtaposition of Aver Min Hachai to dam. So they say any animal you're not allowed to eat the dam, which is including non-kosher animals. That's their shita. The Rabbanan disagree. They say there is no Aver Min Hachai by non-kosher animals. Where do they get it from? Rabbanan Savri lo yisoichal hanefesh im habasar. They say very simply, the pasuk says don't eat the flesh while the animal's alive, implying that it's dafka talking about flesh that you're not allowed to eat while the animal's alive, but you could eat when the animal dies. What's the animal that you're allowed to eat when the animal's shechted? Kosher animals. The very fact that the Torah asers it while it's alive implies that it's talking about an animal that you could eat after it passes away through shechita, which excludes non-kosher animals. Rabbanan Savri lo yiseichal hanefesh im habasar el habasar l'chudei kol shebsari muter atam mitzvah alivarav v'chol she'ein b'sari muter yatam mitzvah alivarav. Very good. So it's a machlokes tanoim. Now the Gemara has the following point.
We just fly over the last
Yeah. Now here's the thing though. According to Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Eliezer, what's the source that it applies to chazer or non-kosher animals? So he said because the juxtaposition of dam to Aver Min Hachai. The Gemara has a question. If you remember yesterday's daf, Rabbi Yehuda's shita is that isser chalal isser. So the question is, why do I need another source, a special source that it should apply to chazer? According to Rabbi Yehuda, it should apply to chazer simply because it's isser chalal isser, meaning every animal should be asa Aver Min Hachai. I don't need a special pasuk. What's the reason why I need a special pasuk? Because I would think because of ein isser chalal isser, right? It's already chazer. Why would I think an additional isser can chal? I need the pasuk. According to Rabbi Yehuda, we say isser chalal isser by an isser kolel when the second isser is more expansive. So over here, you have the isser of chazer. The isser of Aver Min Hachai should automatically be chal because it's more expansive because it applies to even kosher animals. So it's a good point. So the Mefarshim explain, you see from this Gemara that the Gemara just assumes as a given, Aver Min Hachai should apply to any living animal. The reason why you need a pasuk is because ein isser chalal isser. But the problem is Rav Yehuda holds isser chalal isser. So what do you need a pasuk for? So we said before that Rav Yehuda and Rav Eliezer have a pasuk. Why does Rav Yehuda need the pasuk? Says the Gemara, Rav Yehuda lama likra leisi isser Aver isser leichal al isser toma shekin isser b'nei noyach. So says the Gemara, you're right. Truth is, why is it? Because Isser Chal Isser, when the second Isser is more expansive. Why is the second Isser more expansive? Because it applies to Goyim as well. Because Aver Min Hachai applies to Goyim as well. So the Gemara says, you're right. Who were the two opinions that found the pasuk to Aser that Chazer is Aver Min Hachai? It was Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Eliezer. So the question is, why would Rabbi Yehuda need this? Isser Chalisei. The answer is, you're right. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't. It's Rav Eliezer. Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Eliezer both agree that Aver Min HaChai applies to Chazer. The machlokes is why. Rabbi Yehuda says because of Isser Chalisei, I don't need a makar. Rav Eliezer is the one who uses the makar from the juxtaposition to dam. So it's not Rabbi Yehuda, it's Taka Rav Eliezer. The Gemara says, Eina Chanami, V'chi Itzich Kra Rav Elazar. Rav Elazar, not Rav Eliezer, I apologize. Rav Elazar. And the Gemara says, this point, that the real source of the juxtaposition was not said by Rav Yehuda because he has Isser Chal Isser, but rather it was said by Rav Elazar. The truth is the Brisa says it beferish. Tad Nami Hachi. This is a long Brisa that brings down all these opinions, but if you notice, the source of the juxtaposition to Dam, in this Brisa, it's Rav Elazar, not Rav Yehuda. Because that's the point. Rav Yehuda doesn't need a makar because of Isser Chal Isser. Look at the Brisa. The Brisa says, Aver Min HaChai, Noyeg B'Behema Chai V'Oif. Aver Min HaChai applies to all animals, both behemoths, chayas, and oif. Bein tameya, bein tahora. Whether they're kosher, whether they're non-kosher. Shenemar, this we just had. Racha zaka bilti echal adam. Kol shat mitzav adam mitzav elivarov. V'chol shiat mitzav adam iyat mitzav elivarov. Right, this makar of the juxtaposition to dam. Who said this? Divrei Rav Elazar. Unlike the first brisa, which had Rav Yehuda and Rav Elazar, it takes Rav Yehuda out because Rav Yehuda learns it out from Isser Chal Isser. So it was actually authored by Rav Elazar. Because the Gemara makes a presumption that every living animal should be Asur Mishum Aver Min HaChai, because it's an Aver Min HaChai. The whole reason, the Gemara's assumption, again, that's the Gemara's opinion, the reason why it wouldn't apply to Chazer is because of Isser Chal Isser. So to that, so it's Rav Elazar who needs a makar. Now the Chachamim say, Eina noyeg el b'tayrin. The Chachamim say, no, it only applies to kosher animals. Shenemar lo yiseichel hanefesh ha'basar. El ha'basar l'chudei kol b'shar mutter. Yatam mitzvah avar choshem b'shar mutter. Yenatam mitzvah over. So far this is perfect. Now the Gemara adds a third opinion, which we have not had till now, which is Rav Meir. Eina noyeg el b'behema tahayra bilvad. Rav Meir's opinion is that it only applies to behemoths, kosher behemoths, meaning not kosher birds. According to Rav Meir, there is no isser of Aver Min HaChai by a kosher bird or a kosher chaya. It's dafka behema. Okay. Amr Rabbi bar Shmuel, Amr Rav Chizda v'Temer Rav Yosef, Amri lo Amr Rabbi Shila, Amr Rav Chizda v'Temer Rav Yosef, Amri lo Rabbi Shimi, Amr Rav Chizda v'Temer Rav Yosef. My time is Rav Meir. What's Rav Meir's source that Aver Min HaChai only applies to behemoths exclusively? So the Gemara says, Amar Krav v'zavachta mibekarcha v'tzainecha. Okay, because it says bekarcha, meaning, and this is in the same parasha of Aver Min HaChai, it says to bring karbanos. Karbanos are behemoths, so Aver Min HaChai only applies to behemoths as well. Okay, so we have had a machlokes tanoim whether the Isser of Aver Min HaChai applies to non-kosher animals or only kosher animals. Says the Gemara, Amrav Gidol Marav, Rav explains, Machlokes b'Yisrael. The Machlokes is for a Jew to eat the Aver Min HaChai of a Chazer. That's a Machlokes Tanoim. Abel beben Noach. But for a Goy to eat Chazer, Aver Min HaChai, Divrei HaKol Muzer al HaTamarim V'Tamim. Meaning, in other words, very simple. For Jews, where we have a major distinction between Chazer and cows, if I eat the Chazer Aver Min HaChai, I'm not Aver Min HaChai. It's machlokes. But a guy who's allowed to eat chazer, for him chazer is like a cow. If he eats Aver Min HaChai from a chazer, it's kuli alma a problem. Okay. Tanami hachi. We have a similar source for this, that by goyim, everyone agrees that Aver Min HaChai applies to non-kosher animals. It says Aver Min HaChai, ben noyach, a goy, muzer al tameim val tahirim. A guy is not allowed to eat the Aver Min HaChai of a non-kosher animal, so you see it's mafurish. V'Yisrael in muzer taharim b'vad. But a Jew, it only applies to kosher animals. Now, the Gemara just has a quick point. So this brisa clearly states that the opinion that holds it applies to kosher animals, which is the Chachamim, but it does not. But by goyim, it applies to non-kosher animals as well. But it says it applies to kosher animals. Animals is plural. Why? Because this is the Chachamim shita that by kosher animals it applies to behema chayva oif. But ikada amri tahira. But some have a different girsa that it says it only applies to kosher animal. Behema, meaning because this is an allusion to the shita of Meir that it only applies to behemas, not to chayas and oifas. For Meir, ikada mitarin v'rabbanan. So it's just a matter of, are you geiris tahira or tahirim? So it's kosher animal, tahira or tahirim. If it's tahirim, that's an allusion to the Shida HaChachamim that it applies to kosher behemoths, chayes, and oifis. That's tahirim, plural. But if it says tahira, if Yegar is tahira, that's an allusion to the Shita of Meir that it only applies to a kosher behemoth, not a kosher chayev oif. Okay. Now, again, Rav Shita is that it only applies to Bnei Noyach, that Bnei Noyach, goyim are not allowed to eat the chazers, Evim and Achai. L'kuli Alma. Amr of Shizvi, Afa, Nami Tanina. We have a brisa that speaks this out. What does the brisa say? Ochal Evim and Achai mimena. If a Jew ate an Evim and Achai from a non-kosher bird, okay? Einoi Seifek Esaboim. You don't get lashes. Why? Because this follows the view that Jews do not have the Isser of Evim and Achai by non-kosher animals. But then it says, Ve'ein Shchita b'tarasa. Shchita does not help. I don't understand. This brisa doesn't make a lot of sense. It says that if I take a non-kosher bird, what's an example of a non-kosher bird? I take an eagle, and I eat an evim and achai from an eagle, ostrich. I eat an evim and achai from an ostrich. No lashes, because it doesn't apply to non-kosher birds. Then it says shchita doesn't metaher it. Okay, you're telling me shchita doesn't help me eat an ostrich? Of course not. So it says the Gemara. If we're talking about a Jew, if this brisa is talking about a Jew, and it's saying that Evim and Achai, Achal Evim and Achai in a Sefek Aboim, right? That if you eat Evim and Achai, you don't get lashes, and it's talking about a Jew, and then it says Shchita is not matar, Pshita is Shchita Rasei. Of course, a Shchita is not matar, an ostrich. Of course, it's Pashat. Elolah b'nei Noach. It must be it's b'nei Noach, meaning, and what it means is Mechlal da'aser. What it means is like this. The brisa is really referring to a guy, and it's saying that a guy doesn't get lashes. The reason why he doesn't get lashes is because there is no, while it's aser, there's no lashes for a guy. Okay. 1 second, I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay, the lashes. Yeah, I guess there's no. It's aser. So the Gemara says El Lav and Enoyach. It must be referring to a guy. Now let's reread the brisa if it's referring to a guy. The part about shchita is not matahar. What it means is like this: if a guy shechs an ostrich and the ostrich is still flapping around, you're not allowed to eat it. Meaning, by Jews, what makes it no longer evim and achai is shchita. By goyim, what makes it no longer evim and achai is death. So if you shecht it and it's still flopping around, ain't shchita mitarasa. It's talking about a guy. And then it says you don't get lashes. There's no lashes for a guy because we don't administer lashes to goyim, but it's aser. So you see this brisa is referring to a guy, and it's saying there's no lashes, but there's an isser. So you see that the isser applies to non-kosher birds, applies to goyim as well. Okay.
Is there actually time when the goyim is that?
What?
The practice they bring it to the law or whatever it is for determination of the eating.
I don't know. Not sure. Ramani Bar Potish, Rami Reisha Asefer. Ramani Bar Potish was bothered by the contradiction in this brisa because it starts off by saying there's no lashes, which applies to a goyim, and then it says shchita doesn't help, and we said what's going on. And Umeshani Reisha B'Yisrael V'Sefer Noach. So he does the same. He says the Reisha is a Yisrael and the Sefer is a Bnei Noach. So it's a slightly different analysis of the Mishnah. Amar Rav says like this: Evim min achai tzarich kezayis. In order to be over the Isser, you have to eat a kazayis of Evim and Achai. Meaning, the limb has to be the size of a kazayis. Okay, my taima, what's the source that it has to be a kazayis to get lashes? Achila ksibbe, because it says the lashon lo yisoichal, achila is always a kazayis. Okay, so therefore you're only going to get lashes if it's a kazayis. Here's the problem. Masiv Rav Amram, ochal Evim and Achai mimena, einoi soifek arboyim, ve'ein shchimita metarasai, V'i solka daitach be'inon kazayis tepek leidichalka bezayis. Here's the kasha. What did this brisa just say? If a person eats a limb of an evim and achai from a non-kosher bird, the halacha is you don't get lashes, right? Because evim and achai does not apply to non-kosher birds. Okay, so let's just go basic brisa. I grab an ostrich, I eat the evim and achai, I don't get lashes because the evim and achai does not apply to non-kosher birds. Okay. How much did I eat? You had to eat a kazayis, right? Because that's the point. And I don't get lashes because Evim and Achai doesn't apply to non-kosher birds. If I ate a kazayis, shouldn't I get lashes because I ate a kazayis of an ostrich? Meaning, if you're telling me Evim and Achai doesn't have to be a kazayis, so very simple. The case is I ate a tiny amount, it happens to be an aver. An aver could be a small limb. I ate an aver of an ostrich, And it's telling me I don't get lashes. I don't get lashes because of ostrich, because I ate too little of it. It wasn't a kazayas. And I don't get lashes even min achai because it doesn't apply to non-kosher birds. But if you're telling me even min achai has to be a kazayas, which means I ate a kazayas. If I ate a kazayas, you tell me I don't get lashes because even min achai. Yeah, but what about the fact that I ate an ostrich? You understand? I mean, once you're telling me it's a kazayas, then I had to have eaten a kazayas. I ate a significant amount. You understand? If you're telling me how much I have to eat even min achai to get lashes, a kazayas. So the Brisa says that if a Jew eats a non-kosher bird, Ev min achai, there's no lashes. But if you ate a kazayas, you should get lashes because it's a non-kosher bird. No, it says Ev min achai, and if you're telling me Ev min achai is a kazayas, that means you ate a kazayas, so you should get lashes mitzad a non-kosher bird. Forget about Ev min achai. You should be lashes mitzad. But the Gemara is saying every Eivim and Achai to get lashes means a kazayas. So when the Brisa says that if you ate Eivim and Achai you don't get lashes because it's a non-kosher bird, forget about non-kosher bird. What about the fact that I ate a kazayas of an ostrich? So the Gemara says, here's the aside. The answer is, and this is going to be the same answer for the next 3 or 4 Gemaras, and that is, it could be a kazayas for Eivim and Achai, but not a kazayas for ostrich. How do you do this? The answer is very simple. To be over the isser of non-kosher animals, forget Eivim and Achai, chazer, ostrich, all these things, you have to eat a kazayas of the basar. The case over here, to be over Eivim and Achai, it also has to be a kazayas. But included in the kazayas is meat, sinews, and bones. So the case is I ate a kazayas of the limb, but I'm not going to get lashes. Not because of Eivim and Achai, because it doesn't apply to non-kosher birds. What about the fact that it was an ostrich? Yeah, but it wasn't a kazayas of the meat. It was a kazayas including bone, including sinews, including feathers. And the halacha is, you're only over the isser of lashes of a non-kosher animal if you ate basar, a kazayas of basar. I didn't eat a kazayas of basar. I ate a kazayas, it has to be a kazayas, but it's a kazayas of the aver, which includes parts of the animal that are inedible. So for aver menachai, it's a kazayas, but it's not a kazayas for non-kosher animals. Says the Gemara, the answer is like Rabbi Nachman's answer, which is going to be the answer we're going to have the next 3 or 4 in a row, and that is, it could be a kazayas for Eivim Nachai, but not a kazayas for other things. How so? Because Eivim Nachai includes bones. The Isser of Chazer, let's say, has to be a kazayas of the flesh of the Chazer, as opposed to Eivim Nachai, which is a kazayas, but it includes bones and sinews. B'mashu basar gidim vatsamos. It is a kazayas, but it includes a little bit of flesh. A kazayas, Eivim Nachai needs to be a kazayas, but it also has to have flesh, bone, and sinews. So it could be 90% bone. So you're not going to be, you get lashes mitzad non-kosher animal, but you would get lashes mitzad Eivim Achai. Hachanai mashu basar gidim matzamos. Tashema, you are eating the bones. Correct. So mitzad Eivim Achai, it's a kazayas, because that's the definition of Eivim Achai, is the bones. But mitzad chazer or ostrich or whatever, then it's not considered a isser of achila. Correct. Now, by the way, the Gemara this is going to be the same answer. We're going to constantly bring brises that imply you could have Eivim and Achai on less than a kazayas, and the Gemara is going to answer the same thing. It is a kazayas, but it includes bones. And it is a kazayas, but it includes bones and sinews. The same answer. Tashema Amarav, go to the next page. Rav said, Ochal tzipor tahora b'chayeha. If a person eats an entire kosher bird, but it's a very, very small kosher bird. It's very, very small. And the entire thing is less than a kazayas. The halach is b'chol shu. You're going to be over the isser, meaning, this is a yesod, as we'll see in a moment, eating the entire bird is considered eating Eivim and Achai. You'll say, well, of course, there is an opinion that will help to hold that if you eat an entire bird alive, it's not Eivim and Achai, because Aver is a limb. This is not a limb, this is the whole thing. Okay, but he disagrees. He says if you eat a little one, meaning less than a kazayas, you're over Eivim and Achai. Stop right here before we finish the brisa. Wait a minute, I thought that it has to be a kazayas, and the Gemara is going to answer, it is a kazayas, but it's not a kazayas of meat. It's a kazayas if you include the bones and the feathers and the sinews. That's what it means. So let's go back to the Gemara. Bimisasa, but once the animal dies, then it's no longer Eivim and Achai, now it's just a nevela. So b'kazayis, you're going to get lashes if you eat a kazayis. So when it's alive, it's less than a kazayis. When it dies, and now it's not Eivim and Achai anymore, now it's nevela, it has to be a kazayis. Utmeya, and a non-kosher bird, bein b'chaya, bein misasa b'chol shehu, a non-kosher bird could be less than a kazayis. This is because a non-kosher bird is called a beria. And you're over nisar beria even on less than a kazayis, as opposed to, let's say, a nevela, which is not a beria, because a beria has to be from the moment of its inception. Okay, but it's not for now. Point is, you see over here that it could be Eiver min Achai, even less than a kazayis. Says the Gemara, Hachanami, Mashu Basar Gidim Atzamos. Same answer. And that is, it is a kazayis with bones. It's the same answer. So it's not a kazayis of basar, but it's a kazayis if you include the bones and the sinews, etc. Tashema, natal tzipar she'ein by kazayis v'achal. You take a bird that's not a kazayis, but you eat the whole thing. You pop the whole live animal in your mouth. Rabbi Poita, Rabbi says there's no lashes. Why? Rabbi Shita is that Aver min Achai is an Aver, not the whole thing. That's a Shita of Rabbi. Rav Elazar, Rav Shimon, they mechayiv, they disagree. And by the way, I think they would be, I think what all of us would understand, if you eat the entire bird alive, of course it's Aver min Achai. And they argue, Kal v'choymer, al Aver echad Achayiv, al kul kol shekin. They said, if you're over for eating a wing, you're not going to be over for eating the whole thing. But what do you see though? And by the way, let's just keep going. A chon kavach, let's say you choke the bird and kill it and then eat it, so now it's no longer Eiver min Achai, now it's an avela. That's divrei bakol bekazais. That needs a kazais. Ad kanle pligi el demar savar chayel levar mamedes umar savar lave levar mamedes. The whole machlokes is whether you look at a bird whole as multiple limbs or a whole unit. Rebbe says, I look at it as a whole unit. It's not Eiver min Achai. They would say, no, a whole bird is made up of multiple Eivarim. You as a full person, we don't look at you as a full person, we look at you as multiple limbs combined together. So there's a machlokes of whether it's Eiver min Achai if you eat the whole bird. But what do you see though? It's less than a kazayis. So you see Eiver min Achai doesn't have to be a kazayis. The kuli amir lo be kazayis. Answer, same thing. Same answer, and that is that it's less than a kazayis of basar, but it is a kazayis, including the bones, the sinews. Mia kaidi. Now, just 1 second. Interesting point. So you're telling me the entire bird does not have a kazayis of basar, but it has a kazayis with bones? What type of bird is this? Do you understand what type of bone structure this bird would have to be that the entire bird doesn't have a kazayis of basar? You're telling me that within the limb it has a lot of bone sinews, but it doesn't have a kazayis of basar? What type of bird is this? Amrav Shravya in Bekalnisa. It's the Kalnisa bird. It's a very thin bird that has a lot of bones, very, very little meat. Okay. Now the problem is the Kalnisa bird is a non-kosher bird. So it says the Gemara, Im ema seifa chon kavachla divar kol bekazayis hakanisa if tamehu v'amarav tamei b'mechayim b'usas mashu. Wait a minute. If it's a non-kosher bird, then it should be asam mishuda beria. If you're talking about the kanisa bird is a non-kosher bird. It should be a beria. You don't need a kazayis. The Gemara says Ain kanisa. It doesn't mean it's the actual kanisa bird. Kanisa bird is non-kosher. It just means it's like the kanisa bird. Just to finish up, we'll finish in a few minutes. We had before a machlokes. Do you look at a whole bird as Eiver min Achai or not? So the fundamental shaila is a whole bird a whole unit, or is it a unit made up of multiple Eivarim? That's the fundamental shaila. Says the Gemara, Amar Rava. Now the Gemara says like this. The Gemara believes, and this is the Gemara's conclusion, what you think about matters. Not just like in halacha, here. If I look at a bird, and even Rebbe, the Gemara says, Sava Rebbe machshavas oichlin shma machshava. If we assume, which is what we assume, that Rebbe does take thought into account, that would mean chishev la'oichla aver. Rebbe held that if you take the entire bird while it's alive and pop it in your mouth, it's not Eiver min Achai, because it's not Eivarim, it's one unit. But let's say you pick it up and you're like, I'm going to eat one Eiver of this bird. And then you just say, pop it in my mouth. Once you thought you're going to eat an Eiver, that means you look at it as a small Eiver, not as a whole bird. Then even if you eat the whole bird, you're going to be Eiver min Achai. Because the very thought that you had about this bird, that it's not a whole unit, you looked at it as a small Eiver of the unit, that itself gave a chashivas. That's an interesting situation, by the way. That would mean, according to Rebbe, you have a small little bird here. If I were to eat the whole thing, I would be potter from Eiver min Achai. But if Mr. Lorch, who thought about the Eivarim, would pop it in his mouth, he'd be Eiver, because he gave it chashivas. The Gemara says, where do we find such a thing, where if I eat it, I'm not chayiv, but you eat it, you're chayiv? And the Gemara says, Amalei, zel if you machshavtoi, v'zel if machshavtoi. Yeah, you go bas and machshava. The people, not everyone has the same machshava. I look at the bird as one unit, he looks at the bird as multiple limbs. The Gemara says the opposite is also true. Rav Elazar, Rav Shimon, who look at it as small units, if they were to think The opposite, it would also be true. Amar Rava, imtem silam esav Rav Elazar Rav Shem mechashavas oichlin shema machshava chishev laochla mesa. If a person really intends to eat it after it dies, not avarim, he really wants to let it die. He's going to shecht it and he's going to eat the whole thing. Then all of a sudden you don't look at it as avarim. You look at it as a whole chicken. Then mesa v'achla chayaha potter. But then the Gemara says, then if you were to eat it, then if you were to eat it alive, it would be potter. Because you're no longer looking at it as a small unit, you're looking at it as a whole chicken. Same point. You'll find it'll be different, that for each person it'll have different halachas, and the answer is we go basir machshava. What we'll do is right now, I want to start the next Gemara. We're not going to be able to finish. I'm probably going to have to chazer it over tomorrow, but I don't want to stop so far away from the end of the daf. Very, very simple. Amar Rav Yochanan. There's two different psukim that we're going to be dealing with. This is one's in Devarim, one's in Shmos. And it's very simple. Let's go through very slowly. Lo soichal hanefesh im habasar. That's in Devarim. You know what it says? Do not eat the soul in the basar. Ze'evim menachai. Okay, that's the source for Ev Menachai. So Devarim is Ev Menachai. And then in Shmais it says, Ubasar basada trefa lo yiseichelu, ze basar menachai, ubasar menatrefa. That's the Isser of basar menachai. Basar menachai is a separate Isser, the Ev Menachai. Basar is a kazayas of the flesh. Aver includes bones, sinews, and flesh. It's a separate Isurim. So Ev Menachai is from Devarim, basar menachai, and basar trefa is Shmais. You know why this is important to know? You'll say, who cares? It's all Isurim anyway. I'll tell you why. If in one forgetting, you're warned, and you eat basar menachai and basar menatrefa, it's from one source, you're only going to get 1 lashes. But if in one forgetting, you ate eva menachai and basar menachai, which he's saying are 2 different psukim, you'll get 2 separate lashes. In other words, knowing these 3 Isurim, where they come from, is negeya, how many lavim I'm over for lashes. Rish Lakish disagrees, and he says, Lo sachal nefesh basar ze'ev menachai, that I agree, but it's also basar menachai. So he believes that basar menachai and ev menachai both from Devarim, ubasar seida b'treifa lo zeh basar menatreifa. So the machlokes is, where is the source from basar menachai? According to Rav Yochanan, it's Devarim. According to Rish Lakish, it's Shmos. And the Gemara says the practical difference is Achal basar minachai ubasar minachai ubasar minachai. If in one forgetting you were warned, you did aver minachai and basar minachai, how many lavim are you over? According to Rav Yochanan, 2, because one's from Devarim, one's from Shmos. You'll get 2 sets of lashes. Rish Lakish and alachai v'la'achas. According to Rish Lakish, they're both from Devarim. Therefore, you're only going to get 1 set of lashes. Okay, just to finish up. But Achal basar minachai ubasar minatreifa. If in one forgetting you ate basar menachai and basar menatreifa, which basar menatreifa is for sure Shmos, the shaila is basar menachai. Rish Lakish chayv shtayim. According to Rish Lakish, you get 2 lashes because basar menatreifa is Devarim, basar menachai is Devarim, and basar menatreifa is Shmos. L'Rav Yochanan la'achas. You only get to go 1 because it's from the same lav. And aval achal eva menachai ubasar menatreifa divrei kol chayv shtayim. Everyone agrees that's 2 lavim. And tomorrow we'll talk more about this. I will stop.
Interesting though that the extensive note that they have on this